You can't make yourself work by putting up something beautiful on the wall.
I can't embrace despair, even though it sometimes feels very attractive and sensible to do so.
Julie, you must never listen to this.
I know, Werner, I'm never going to.
The more violently, more strongly you feel about life, the more strongly you must be aware of death.
This is a video about creativity, struggle, and how some of the world's most notable artists often tie themselves to the more painful sides of human experience.
I paint with my qualities and faults.
Once I started looking at things as they are, I got very depressed. I think it happens. I think it's very normal for everyone.
What is in this space is under my control.
We're going to be digging into stories of writers, painters, and musicians, trying to understand in a more full way why the creative life is so often defined by feelings of discontent, obsession, alienation, instability, and frustration.
But here's the thing, you're terrible at this. You're no good at it. Go faster, motherfucker. Keep going faster. Why are you so slow? Why are you so fucking slow?
We're also going to cover salvation and how we can use creative work to step through limiting stories and make our life more adventurous, transformative, and impactful.
That the photograph is like her trophy. It's what she received as the reward for this adventure, just like some guy climbs Mount Everest, and he has a flag in his hand. And you see him there. Deanne has the photograph.
Before we jump in, I want to give a massive thanks to all the response and comments that came in on the last video. And give a shout out to all the people who have joined the channel recently. When response comes in like that, I massively appreciate the addition of value that people are offering on the pages here, and try to personally answer everything that comes in over the first 48 hours after an upload. I also had about another 10 people join over on the Patreon, so I wanted to note again that I hope you'll recognise that this video doesn't come with a third-party sponsor, and just signpost that route where you can help support, as well as accessing a whole load of exclusive material from Creative Minds. These 10 sign-ups since the last video dropped represent another building of momentum on the journey to trying to make Creative Minds more sustainable. And if you believe in the value of this work, consider coming over there and checking it out. And with all that said, thanks for listening. Let's jump into the discussion.
Part 1. What on earth are you all running from?
I've spoken a fair bit on this channel about why artists might be driven to spend so much time on their creative pursuits. There's all different types of creative experience and process, and I'm not claiming to be able to define the motivation for all of these within this piece of work. But I've covered before on this channel how the tendency to spending time on these artistic projects can be linked to an active imagination and an increased sensitivity towards the individual's inner world.
With social anxiety disorder, like I was diagnosed years ago, and hypersensitivity. Like with that kind of thing, isolation is not good, but I feel most comfortable being isolated. So I spend 95% of my time by myself.
Yes, but the other side of it is, it's that same hypersensitivity that makes you a great artist. It's like
my therapist said the same thing.
It's the truth. It's the truth. It's a balance. It's like, it's a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
It's harder to be in the world, but that's the gift.
In order to dig a bit deeper and form a background model to understand all this, I wanted to bring in the well-cited 5-factor model of personality. This framework breaks human personality traits into 5 areas and aligns a high scoring on the area of openness as a signifier for creativity. It will be ignorant and exclusive to try and frame creative thought or work to a single type of human group. But this model does give some way of recognizing the personality traits that, when in our nature or when acted upon and developed, might be more likely to lead us towards putting that artistic work within the center of our priorities. Scoring high on openness suggests a proclivity for the individual to have an active imagination, aesthetic sensitivity, and attentiveness towards inner feelings. It's great for creativity because it recognizes the current understanding of reality and limitations in pre-existing art forms as malleable and able to be pushed or transformed.
Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use. And the minute that you understand that you can poke life and actually something will, if you push in, something will pop out the other side, that you can change it, you can mold it. That's maybe the most important thing.
But as well as the positive aspects of openness, an individual who sits within that state more often might feel less stable, experience a more fragmented and questioning sense of self, and not get so much comfort and pleasure from normal everyday life and the stable background tone on which everything else is laid down.
Taking a close look at what's around us, there is some sort of a harmony. It is the harmony of overwhelming and collective murder. And we, in comparison to the articulate vileness and baseness and obscenity of all this jungle, we, in comparison to that enormous articulation, we only sound and look like badly pronounced and half-finished sentences out of a stupid suburban novel, a cheap novel.
Within this framework of the Big Five personality traits, we can see how a creative might use a sensitivity towards their inner space or proclivity towards an active imagination and intellectual curiosity to investigate possibilities that they see as unexplored in pre-existing art forms and express their unique conceptions of internal struggles or truths that they see in the world around them. It might often involve a leaning into the uncertainties and possibilities of the world and a moving towards those spaces of discomfort where new beauty or unheard truth could be hiding.
Almost flew. When I say this all full of admiration for the jungle. It is not that I hate it, I love it. I love it very much, but I love it against my better judgment.
It's also in this turning away from some of the comforts that other people might find in life that we can encounter the creative process as a therapeutic safe space and a moment in the day where the artist can escape from some of the more confusing or uncertain experiences of reality that they might live, to enter a world in which, with the application of craft, they can attempt to master and express themselves in the way that they feel is true or valuable.
But here's the thing, you're terrible at this. You're no good at it. Go faster, motherfucker. Keep going faster. Why are you so slow? Why are you so fucking slow?
So this drawing that I am going to do now is obviously stem from a fear. Everything stems from a fear. So I am going to indicate my space, and I am going to put inside what is in this space is under my control.
If you watch enough artist videos, you'll often see an audience member ask that question around how an artist sets up their studio or the creative routine that they have around their practice.
This might seem like a very, very mundane question, but what type of notebooks do you prefer? Are they large, like legal pads? Are they leather bound? What type of notebooks do you like to work with?
This can easily be laughed at and pushed away as an inane question. But if you listen closely, I think these questions are often wondering something deeper than the artist's pencil nib size and thoughts on the correct kind of desk or chair setup. It's in these spaces and routines where the artists can find their comfort and therapy and are able to drop into those states whereby the negative emotions and uncertainties of their reality can be forgotten or transformed into the creative expression that allows them to communicate and makes them feel seen and understood.
It's nice to not have to talk to describe how you're feeling. You know what I mean? It's nice to learn about yourself by like sitting down, picking up a guitar and just playing. It's a whole entire journey of self-exploration.
As with all my videos, I want to put forward at this stage, if any of the description or explanation of these discussions are not feeling right for you, or are showing up a blind spot in my own understanding of these issues. Comments are always a space to put down your own point of view for the other creators and artists who are engaging in this community. Now we try to put our finger on some of the possible motivations behind those individuals who commit large sections of their life to the realization of artistic projects. I want to turn our attention to the work now and see how all this background motivation that we've discussed might end up manifesting itself.
Part 2, Compelling Realities.
C'est l'histoire d'un homme qui tombe d'un immeuble de 50 étages. Le mec, au fur et à mesure de sa chute, il se répète sans cesse pour se rassurer. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien. Jusqu'ici, tout va bien.
You've been in therapy?
One time. You know, I had a reason, for going in. And then I asked him straight out, right up front, could this process that we're going to go through affect creativity? And he said, David, I have to be honest with you, it could. And so then I had to shake his hand and
say goodbye, this
yeah.
is not for me.
Since starting writing this video, I've been thinking about that idea of being happy and whether happiness is actually a good goal for artists or creatives who are trying to do their best work. As someone who sleeps in a warm house and can go out and buy food from the shop whenever I want, of course discussions around this concept of happiness are relative. But within that context, is a search towards happiness or satisfaction really the best goal that we can push for?
Etta's seesaw success hit a pivotal point in the mid-'70s when James underwent intense drug and psychological therapy.
I don't know, someone asked me the other day, they said, Etta, you've had a roller coaster of a life. And I mean, you can take that a couple of ways. I could take that and say, yeah, and but if I didn't have a roller coaster, how would I know? How would I be able to sing about the things? How would I be able to feel what I'm singing about? How would I be able to hear someone sing a song and brings tears to my eyes? Why? Because I feel that and because I understand that. And you know what? If I had my life to live over again, those roller coasters, I wouldn't take them out.
With those words from Etta James, I want to think a little bit more about the value of representing conflict or happiness in our work. So take a quick listen to excerpts of these two songs and think about which one you personally find more artistically interesting.
Something told me it was over, babe.
The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the skies, also on the faces of people going by.
It's true that we can probably recognise that the tone of Louis Armstrong's voice does make the songwriting of A Wonderful World a little bit more than the sum of its parts. But other than that uniqueness of the recording, the creative work itself comes off to me as a pretty mundane or unreal depiction of the human experience. Here we see art not as a true representation of that human experience, but something of a fantasy or simulacrum, devoid of conflict and the complexity that can make real life so compelling. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying we have to hate ourselves if we enjoy that kind of stuff, or that there's no space for feelings of happiness or satisfaction within creative work. But in the Etta James piece, it seems to me that we're getting something far more complex, and to my ear at least, far closer to the heart of vital human experience. The power of the emotions we might see as positive within the song are increased and highlighted by the emotions that we might read as negative. An idea of happiness or satisfaction disappears, replaced by a desire for great ecstatic experiences, mixed with that yearning or negative emotion and pain. Later I want to talk a bit more about truth and what the search for finding real truth in the artist's work might mean in terms of their journey. But before that, I didn't want to leave this discussion of complexity in art without pulling in some visual examples too. On screen now, you'll see two more art projects. On the left again, we see reflections of the wonderful world we encountered before, a controlled pastoral view of nature, which we might recognise less as an actual depiction of the reality of nature or the truth of our relationship to it, and more as a projection of the human wishes for a controlled and understandable world which mimics their needs. On the right then, we're seeing something else. To me, this picture can be seen to contain something of the existential doubt and sense of the unknown that lies deep within the human experience. The painter shows the smallness and powerlessness of the individual human, and what we could simply see as the negative emotions brought up by this image actually greatly increase the sense of beauty or impact of the world that's being represented. From producers favouring slightly out of time imperfect drum patterns, to ceramic makers prizing the fragility of their work by drawing attention to its breaks. In all kinds of art forms, we often see that it's that complex, imperfect, and hard to search within human experience, which draws forth some of the most powerful and deeply resonant work.
When you started showing, I think your work attracted an enormous amount of attention, which was a very ambivalent kind, and I think the ambivalence was expressed most clearly in something written by that great Bloomsbury voice, Raymond Mortimer. Ah, if only Mr. Bacon would paint us a rose. In other words, you were a wonderful painter, but why did you have to have all that morbid subject matter?
I mean, if we take that up about why doesn't he paint a rose? A rose also is very mortal. When you see a rose, this beautiful rose that in a day or two is dying, its head is falling over, and it's withered. So is there a great deal of difference between a rose and my subject matter, really? It's just a difference of, it's only a difference of subject matter.
All this discussion might be able to boil down to the simple statement: in order to do their best work, the artist must aim to put something of the truth of their experience onto the page. Of course then, there are some people whose experience is defined by a sense of peace or knowing about the world, maybe due to particular things that have happened to them or ideologies that they live within. So when they approach the page or pick up an instrument, maybe it is that peace, knowing or satisfaction that's going to be expressed in that truthful way to them. But for a lot of people, displaying that satisfied or purely peaceful state may be more likely to fall into a turning away from their truth and lack the power of real honesty or the possible things that they could be putting down on that page.
Part 3. On the cost of truth.
So we've talked now about the motivations behind a lot of great artists' work and that basic search to express some kind of truth that's going to sit behind it. Now I wanted to dig deeper into some of those specific artist stories. One of the artists that I wanted to touch on in this script was Jack Kerouac. In terms of the relationship between suffering and artistic inspiration, Kerouac seems a good example of a kind of chaotic, big highs, big lows writer whose work was often produced in that mythic state of semi-painful, semi-beautiful inspiration. Probably Kerouac's most famous book, On the Road, was said to have been written in something like a single sitting. And I saw the piece of printer paper once in real life, where the entirety of that work was originally produced. This style of mad, chaotic, substance-enhanced creative process is one that's easy to mythicize, by young artists especially. In fact, the stories of those inspired liminal states are undoubtedly interesting and perhaps could even be said to relate to some of the rituals that have been documented in our ancestral groups. But if Kerouac did manage to grasp at some existential truth or beauty in his work, he did so in return for a life that seems like it was defined by a lot of discomfort.
His doctors noted auditory hallucinations, ideas of reference, and feelings that life was not worth living, along with a rambling, grandiose, philosophical manner. He was diagnosed with dementia praecox, what we now call schizophrenia, and after 6 weeks of observation, he was transferred to the Naval Hospital in Bethesda, Maryland, for further evaluation. There, he told his doctors he did not agree with his diagnosis and explained away his symptoms by saying that prior to enlisting, he had been working 16 hours a day writing a novel in the style of James Joyce. He denied hallucinations, but said he could imagine in his mind whole symphonies and see printed pages of words.
If you read Kerouac, like me, you might struggle to see him as the heroic, mythologized writer that the culture which I encountered myself in my late teens seemed to offer him up as. This is not to put down the quality of his writing at all, which shows an unignorable ability to be brilliant and push the limitations of the form.
Sleeping in me raw bed alone and stupid, with just this one pride and consolation, my heart broke in a general despair and opened up inwards to the Lord.
But whatever came about from Kerouac's life and the certain kind of mythologized artistic tropes that it encapsulates, it seems nothing like happy or a heroic experience to live even. In the end, Kerouac died at 47, and even though his work and figure have been burned into culture, the experience he describes is one of alcoholism and states of anxiety, struggle and depression.
Well, what is it that in your judgment distinguishes the hippie movement from, for instance, or simply a routine radical
question over
political movement?
No, I interrupted your sentence.
Kerouac seems like an interesting example to look at here, because at different times in his life or in different states, he both represents the artist in community, as well as the artist as an isolated, alienated, or misunderstood figure. An open limitation of this video and what I'm saying here is that I won't really be covering the power of artistic communities and the joy and sense of meaning that can come from being a group or movement of artists. I wonder when you reflect on your own work, how much you think your best stuff will actually be defined by solo personal experience and digging into that individual sense of your internal life. But the reality, in this time of history at least, is that a lot of people do place importance to the deep reflection on an individual's inner mind, which appeals in art and suggests some of the most true and powerful forms of expression we can make.
Session 10. Breakthrough. One of these last one, big things right with the blows out there. That's one of you now with the father, son, too.
Can you say, are there any themes which particularly attract you now as a poet, things that you feel you would like to write about?
Perhaps this is an American thing. I've been very excited by what I feel is the new breakthrough that came with, say, Robert Lowell's life studies, this intense breakthrough into very serious, very personal, emotional experience, which I feel has been partly taboo. Robert Lowell's poems about his experiences in a mental hospital, for example, interest me very much. These peculiar, private, and taboo subjects, I feel, have been explored in recent American poetry. I think particularly of the poetess Anne Sexton. They have a kind of emotional and psychological depth, which I think is something perhaps quite new, quite exciting.
When I was thinking about who to bring into this essay on the struggle that an artist's life and journey can bring, Kafka was another name that came to mind. This writer addressed the suffering of the creative performer directly in his short story The Hunger Artist, which I've discussed in one of my previous videos on this channel. But across his writing, we see work that's imbued with the anxiety, alienation, and nightmarish states of overcomplexity that can be seen to perfectly sit as manifestations of that type of creative personality we looked at earlier.
Thin, without fever, not cold, not warm, with empty eyes, without a shirt, the young man under the stuffed quilt heaves himself up, hangs around my throat, and whispers in my ear, "Doctor, let me die."
Kafka's words are so imbued with anxiety, uncertainty, and a sense of ungraspable meaning that the word Kafkaesque is still widely used to describe certain nightmarish states of this kind. In this following description of Kafka, taken from a write-up on the Kafka Museum website, we see something of an archetypal form of the kind of compulsive, obsessed artist, experiencing a toxic relationship with the work, defined by struggle and alienation from the world around him, a deep-rooted drive for some kind of greatness and meaning within the human experience, as well as the frustration and dissatisfaction that might come from the space between the ideal of the work you wish to produce and the actual realization of what ends up being brought into the world. For the maximalist that Kafka was, writing represented his struggle for achieving the highest possible goals, a struggle against the impossible. This is the source of Kafka's incessive dissatisfaction with almost everything he had written. Writing was his salvation and damnation at the same time, an obstacle on his life's journey, as well as a refuge at the time of hopelessness and defeat. The act of writing gradually replaced or suppressed other goals that he had striven for in his life.
I will never get the bridge of the nose and the lips and so on. I'll never get my profile. I don't have enough. It's too short, it's too this, it's too that. So it is a fight. It is a fight with your notion of what you need. What you need and what you get is not the same. You need something, you want something, and you get something else.
Part 4, Forms of Salvation.
Okay, I think we've analysed some of the challenges that we might face when we're trying to do our best work. But with that background and that understanding that happiness might not actually be the goal that we're searching for, I want to turn to the real benefits of all this. In short, how we can reach not happiness, but certain forms of satisfaction or moments of growth and epiphany on the creative journey.
I know I can't make it happen, but I know that I can be open to it. I'll invite it in and welcome it and do everything I can to best support this thing that arrives that I know is bigger than me.
Yes.
You know?
It's magical.
Again, I'm not looking to sum up everyone's relationship with their work in this video, but I wanted to put forward an idea that I've recognized in my own work around this.
It's a beautiful process to go. This, like any invention or anything, starts with an idea, and the idea then gets manifested in the material world. It's a beautiful process, and many internal rewards in the doing.
If we can see our need to make things and push for truth in our work as a kind of energy, a force we build up as we realize our ideas and put time into our projects, and something that wants to be expressed and communicated, then whether you're writing a song over a month or a novel over a decade, the key thing here is to get to that completion stage and find some way to channel that energy and release it.
That's amazing, man.
Oh, thank you, man.
The problem comes then when that energy gets stuck or turns back in on itself. This creative push is powerful, coming from all the motivations that we've discussed already in this video. And if you don't let it out, it can easily lead to frustration and cocooning, where we become protective around our work, foster insecurities, and just basically grow those barriers and limitations that wall us in.
Guys.
When we see any kind of artist sharing their work, it's usually quite easy to recognize how much they probably need to do that, and think about how lost or frustrated they might be if they didn't. This energy you have to express yourself, and the fear that comes along with it maybe, has a need to be brought out and exercised. And whether it's pushing through the resistance to systematically finish and distribute your writing, or walking towards a moment of fear where you're going to have to close your eyes a bit and step forward with a piece of visual art, if it's satisfaction, epiphany, or even ecstasy that you're looking for, that internal energy and desire to express these things is going to be a good power to lean into and follow.
Ma'am. You got it. You got it. Start the clock. Okay. Hazel needs a
Part
dog.
5. Your work as gift.
Hazel needs a dog. Hazel needs a
As a closing act to this video, I wanted to come back to a framing that can be really powerful for artists and creatives. And this is the idea of switching the way you see your work in your mind from something that defines us and is purely about fulfilling ourselves to something that is made for other people and a contribution to the world.
Everybody jump and ball out. What you know about them things there? Traveling more than them things there. Muffin shoulder them things there.
As we've spoken above, some of the artistic experience might be to sit in uncomfortable, alienating places, maybe for long periods of time. But this understanding of the purpose of your work, or a conception of what you're aiming at exactly, can help create a frame around the experiences that allow them to be more positive.
Once I started looking at things as they are, I got very depressed. I think it happens. I think it's very normal for everyone. But I think if the world is a dumpster fire, like you're gonna feel really bad if you're not taking you a bucket of water and throwing it on something whenever you can.
Here I wanted to turn to a book on purpose and mission, focused around the Japanese concept of ikigai. Ikigai translates as something like the happiness of always being busy, and is argued to be one of the reasons why certain populations in Japan live notably long lives. The basic premise here is to define yourself within some purpose in life. It doesn't have to be huge or greatly original even, but within that idea of ikigai, your purpose should be based around 4 key requirements. The mission or purpose should be what you love, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what you are good at. Now, not everybody wants to make their creative work instrumental in paying their rent every month. So how we wish to frame all this for ourselves is naturally up to us. But with the idea of seeing our work through that lens, a skill that we develop to be good at, a process that we love to engage in, and something that produces an outcome that we believe is valuable to the world, can be a great basis for a sense of long-term purpose and satisfaction to our work. Something that can ground the possibility for negative experiences we might have in our creative journey within that positive mental framework. Back to the book now, and a quote that can guide us to another really valuable perspective on the creative journey. There is a tension between what is good for someone and what they want to do. The problem is that when the brain develops ingrained habits, it doesn't need to think anymore. This creates a tendency to stick to routines, and the only way of breaking these is to confront the brain with new information. To me, this quote brings us back to the powerful ability we have to use our creative practice and the thing we love to do as a low-stakes way to challenge or develop ourselves, stretch our boundaries, redefine the limiting narratives we might carry inside us, and in general, have a more interesting or fulfilling life.
Each photograph for Deanne was an event. And it could be said, although it could be argued, that for Deanne the most valuable thing wasn't the photograph itself, the art object. It was the event, the experience. I mean, she was absolutely moved by every single event that took place, and she would narrate them in detail. And she wouldn't just say, I took a photograph of so-and-so in their home, but it was the going there, the being there. And once you have become an adventurer, you're geared to adventure. You seek out further adventures. And your life is really based upon them.
I heard a humanities teacher once speaking about education and good teaching practice. When a student comes into a new class or module, they need to step into that classroom with the possibility of real transformation taking place. I love this idea because it encapsulates the hope and ability in any stage in our development to grow and step forward. Here we recognize the power of that backdrop of the open creative mind that recognizes possibility for development and change, and the importance of holding on to it. As I've said, I don't create these pieces to push a single complete framework in which we can understand everybody's experience. But I hope in this piece, I've shown how many great artists might not define their experience or goal in life as happiness. How a certain kind of creative brain might have predilections for sensitivity that can create forms of instability or discomfort. But by harnessing those ideas around purpose that we've discussed, passion, and a reframing of what we're looking for, the artistic practice can provide that impactful way to view the world, challenge negative stories the artist might have about themselves, and open up positive, transformative understandings of potential ways they might wish to move through the world, which might end up serving them more greatly.
I think if you are able to give over as directly as you possibly can the excitement of life, they have labeled that as being a horrific side. I try to make it as what is as intensely real as I can for myself. And in doing that, I may bring in very strongly this quality of mortality.
With all that said, I'm going to go now, but thanks as always to the Patreons, and come check out what's happening over there if you think you might be interested in the exclusive material or would like to support directly the creation of videos like this. And yeah, good luck with your work until next time, and see you then.